It was a Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. Across the United States, the day began with an almost cinematic sense of normalcy. In the Northeast, the sky was a brilliant cloudless blue, a perfect late summer day. People were waking up, getting their kids ready for school, and heading off to work. The morning news cycle was quiet, focused on minor political developments and the usual stories of the day. In New York City, the streets of Lower Manhattan were already bustling with commuters making their way to the iconic Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, symbols of American economic power and ambition. It was a day like any other, filled with the simple, unexamined routines of life. Millions of Americans started their day with no idea that the world they knew was about to change forever. The idea of a major attack on American soil felt like something from a history book or a distant land. The nation was at peace, and the sense of security was palpable. The day held the promise of ordinary things, meetings to attend, deadlines to meet, and families to return to at the end of the day. It was this profound, unassuming peace that made what came next so incomprehensible. In airports along the East Coast, in Boston, Newark, and near Washington, D.C., the morning rush was underway. Travelers checked their bags, grabbed coffee, and made their way through security checkpoints. The atmosphere was routine, perhaps even a little mundane. Flight attendants prepared cabins for cross-country flights to California, passengers settled into their seats, and pilots ran through their pre-flight checklists. It was business as usual. The world was still turning on its familiar axis, completely unaware that in just a few short moments, that axis would be violently and permanently shifted. The quiet hum of a nation starting its day was the last moment of its kind. The beauty of that September morning is a detail that survivors and witnesses often recall with a particular sense of pain. It was a day that felt crisp, clear, and full of life. It's a cruel irony that such a perfect morning would become the backdrop for so much darkness and destruction. The simple, everyday moments, a last kiss goodbye to a spouse, a hurried phone call to a parent, a wave to a child on a school bus, were imbued with a significance that no one could have possibly understood at the time. They were the last ordinary moments before an event that would draw a sharp, undeniable line between the world as it was and the world as it would become. As the sun climbed higher, 19 men moved through the busy airports with a quiet, chilling purpose. They were divided into 4 teams, and their mission had been years in the making. At Logan International Airport in Boston, at Newark Liberty International Airport in New Jersey, and at Washington Dulles International Airport, they blended in with the crowds of ordinary travelers. They were not seen as threats. They carried tickets for 4 separate flights, all bound for California, all loaded with fuel for the long journey. This detail was not a coincidence. It was a critical part of their devastating plan. The planes themselves were to become the weapons. Passing through security was, for most of them, remarkably simple. In 2001, airport security was a fraction of what it is today. Some of the hijackers were flagged by the screening system for extra checks, but this was not unusual. Their checked bags were held off the planes, but they themselves were allowed to board. The weapons they carried, box cutters and small knives, were permitted on flights at the time. They were just faces in the crowd, their deadly intent hidden behind a veneer of normalcy. They took their seats among business travelers, families on vacation, and students heading back to school, waiting for the cabin doors to close. Aboard American Airlines Flight 11 and United Airlines Flight 175 in Boston, the passengers settled in for their flights to Los Angeles. On American Airlines Flight 77 at Dulles and United Airlines Flight 93 in Newark, it was the same story. People read newspapers, made last-minute phone calls, or drifted off to sleep. The flight attendants began their safety demonstrations, their familiar words a soothing part of the travel ritual. There was no sense of danger, no hint of the violence that was about to erupt. These were just 4 ordinary flights on a Tuesday morning, filled with people who expected to land safely in California a few hours later. For the 19 men, these final moments of calm were the culmination of a long and meticulously planned plot. Some had been in the United States for months, even taking flight lessons at American aviation schools. They had learned to fly the very planes they now intended to use as guided missiles. As the aircraft pushed back from their gates and taxied toward the runways, the hijackers were preparing to seize control. For everyone else on board, and for the entire country, These were the last few minutes of an era of innocence that was about to be shattered with brutal force. The first sign that something was terribly wrong came at 8:14 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Air traffic controllers lost contact with American Airlines Flight 11, the Boeing 767 that had departed from Boston. Soon after, a flight attendant, Betty Ong, managed to make a call to a ground supervisor, her voice calm but urgent. She reported that the cockpit was unreachable, a passenger had been stabbed, and the plane had been hijacked. "Our number one is stabbed, our purser is stabbed," she said. "We can't get into the cockpit. The plane is flying erratically." Her call was the first of several desperate messages from the sky, painting a horrifying picture of what was happening. At 8:46 a.m., the world saw the first act of the attack, though few understood it. Flight 11, flying at hundreds of miles per hour, slammed directly into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. On the ground, people heard a deafening roar, followed by a massive explosion. Smoke and flames billowed from the upper floors of the iconic skyscraper. News channels cut to live footage, with anchors speculating that it must have been a terrible accident. A small plane, perhaps, that had gone tragically off course. No one could yet conceive of the deliberate nature of the event. Inside the tower, thousands of people were now trapped above the fiery impact zone. As emergency responders began rushing toward the unfolding disaster in Lower Manhattan, another plane was already in trouble. United Airlines Flight 175, which had also left from Boston, was hijacked shortly after takeoff. At 8:52 a.m., a passenger named Brian Sweeney tried to call his wife, leaving a heartbreaking voicemail. "Jules, this is Brian. Listen, I'm on a plane that's been hijacked. If things don't go well, and it's not looking good, I just want you to know, I absolutely love you." His message, and others like it from passengers and crew, provided a terrifying real-time account of the hijackings. On the ground, air traffic controllers watched in horror as Flight 175 veered sharply off its designated flight path and headed directly for New York City. They tried desperately to warn the pilots, not knowing the hijackers were already in control. For 17 minutes the world watched the North Tower burn, believing it was a singular, isolated tragedy. But at 9:03 a.m., that illusion was shattered. Live on television before the eyes of millions, Flight 175 banked sharply and sliced into the South Tower of the World Trade Center, creating a second, even more dramatic fireball. At that moment, everyone knew. This was not an accident, this was an attack. The impact of the second plane sent a wave of panic and understanding across the nation and the world. The sight of United Airlines Flight 175 hitting the South Tower confirmed the country's worst fears. This was a coordinated, deliberate assault. In an elementary school classroom in Florida, President George W. Bush was informed by his chief of staff, who whispered in his ear, "A second plane has hit the second tower. America is under attack." The president's face, captured on camera, showed a fleeting look of shock and grim resolve. The day's agenda was instantly erased, replaced by a crisis of unimaginable proportions. While the world's attention was fixed on the burning towers in New York, a third attack was already in motion. American Airlines Flight 77, which had departed from Dulles International Airport, had been hijacked shortly after 8:50 a.m. The hijackers took control and turned the plane back toward Washington, D.C. For over 30 minutes, the Boeing 757 flew undetected, its transponder turned off. A passenger, Renee May, a flight attendant on the plane, managed to call her mother. She said the plane had been hijacked by 6 individuals, and that they had been moved to the back of the aircraft. It was a final, desperate message of love and a plea for help. At 9:37 a.m., the hijackers, with one of them at the controls, executed a difficult, high-speed turn and slammed Flight 77 into the western face of the Pentagon, the headquarters of the U.S. Department of Defense. The impact and subsequent fire caused a section of the massive building to collapse, killing all 64 people on board the plane and 125 military and civilian personnel inside. The attack on the very symbol of America's military strength sent a clear and terrifying message. The nation's capital was a target, and the attackers were capable of striking at the heart of its power structure. With 2 skyscrapers burning in New York and the Pentagon smoldering in Arlington, Virginia, the U.S. government took unprecedented action. The Federal Aviation Administration ordered a nationwide ground stop, halting all civilian air traffic for the first time in American history. Thousands of planes were ordered to land at the nearest available airport. The skies over the United States, normally filled with aircraft, were about to fall silent. It was a surreal and eerie quiet, a stark symbol of a nation brought to its knees, bracing for what might come next. A fourth plane was still in the air. The fourth and final hijacked plane was United Airlines Flight 93, a Boeing 757 that departed late from Newark, bound for San Francisco. Because of the delay, the passengers and crew on board had a crucial advantage. They knew about the attacks in New York and Washington. Through phone calls to loved ones and officials on the ground, they learned that their hijacking was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger, coordinated assault. They were told about the planes that had struck the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. They quickly understood that their flight was not headed for a safe landing. It was another weapon aimed at another American landmark, believed to be the U.S. Capitol or the White House. Faced with this horrifying reality, a group of passengers and crew members made a decision. They were not going to let the hijackers succeed. They took a vote. They decided to fight back. In a series of phone calls, they said goodbye to their families, expressed their love, and explained their plan. Tom Burnett told his wife, "I know we're all going to die. There's 3 of us who are going to do something about it." Jeremy Glick told his wife he and others were going to rush the hijackers. And Todd Beamer was overheard on an open line saying, "Are you guys ready? Okay, let's roll." That phrase would become a rallying cry for American resolve. The cockpit voice recorder captured the sounds of the struggle. Passengers could be heard shouting, fighting, and using a food cart to try to break down the cockpit door. The hijackers were heard reacting in panic, trying to rock the plane to throw the passengers off balance. They knew they were losing control. Realizing they would not reach their intended target, the hijacker at the controls made a final, desperate move. He rolled the plane and plunged it toward the ground. At 10:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 93 crashed into an empty field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, at over 500 miles per hour. The 40 passengers and crew members on Flight 93 perished in the crash, but their heroic actions almost certainly saved countless other lives. They prevented a 4th catastrophic attack on a symbol of American democracy in Washington, D.C. Their bravery in the face of certain death stands as one of the most powerful and inspiring stories of that terrible day. The field in Shanksville is now sacred ground, home to the Flight 93 National Memorial, a tribute to the ordinary people who, in the final moments of their lives, became extraordinary heroes and changed the course of history. Back in New York, the situation at the World Trade Center was deteriorating with terrifying speed. The fires, fed by thousands of gallons of jet fuel, raged at temperatures hot enough to weaken the steel skeletons of the towers. First responders, firefighters, police officers, and paramedics had rushed into the buildings, climbing flights of stairs laden with heavy gear, trying to rescue those trapped above. Many of them knew the risks, but they went anyway. They were trying to save lives, climbing toward the flames, while thousands of others were desperately trying to get out. Their courage in those moments was nothing short of heroic. For those trapped on the upper floors, there was no escape. The stairwells were blocked by fire and debris. In the minutes that followed the impacts, people on the floors above the crash zones made frantic phone calls to their families. They were calls of love, of fear, and of final goodbyes. Tom McGinnis on the 92nd floor of the North Tower called his wife to tell her he loved her and their children. His call, and so many others, provided a haunting record of the human tragedy unfolding high above the city streets. The world watched, helpless, as the towers burned. Then, the unthinkable happened. At 9:59 a.m., after burning for 56 minutes, the South Tower began to collapse. The steel structure, weakened by the intense heat, could no longer support the weight of the floors above. In a terrifying cascade of concrete and steel, the 110-story skyscraper imploded, pancaking down into a massive cloud of dust and debris that rolled through the streets of Lower Manhattan. People on the ground ran for their lives, engulfed by a thick, dark plume that turned day into night. The sound was a deafening roar, unlike anything ever heard before. Just 29 minutes later, at 10:28 a.m., the North Tower, the first to be hit, met the same fate. It had stood for 102 minutes. Its collapse was just as swift, just as total. Where 2 of the world's most famous buildings had stood just hours before. There was now a gaping hole in the skyline, and a mountain of twisted steel and pulverized concrete. The collapse of the towers claimed the lives of most of the people still inside, including hundreds of first responders who'd gone in to help. For New York City, and for the world, it was a moment of profound shock and unimaginable loss. The immediate aftermath of the attacks was a scene of chaos, grief, and disbelief. In Lower Manhattan, the area around the World Trade Center, soon to be known as Ground Zero, was a toxic, smoldering ruin. Rescue efforts began immediately, as survivors emerged from the dust cloud, dazed and injured. Thousands of firefighters, police officers, and construction workers descended on the site, beginning a desperate search for anyone who might have survived in the voids of the wreckage. For days and weeks they dug through the debris, driven by hope but finding mostly heartbreak. The scale of the destruction was almost impossible to comprehend. The human cost of September 11th was staggering. In total, 2,977 innocent people were killed, not including the 19 hijackers. At the World Trade Center, 2,753 people died, including 343 firefighters, 60 police officers, and 8 paramedics who gave their lives trying to save others. At the Pentagon, 184 people were killed, and on the 4 hijacked flights, all 246 passengers and crew members perished. The victims came from all walks of life, and from more than 77 different countries, making it a truly global tragedy. They were mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters. The youngest was 2-year-old Christine Lee Hansen on Flight 175. The oldest was 82-year-old Robert Norton, a passenger on the same flight. Countless families were shattered, their lives irrevocably altered by the loss of a loved one. The personal stories that emerged painted a devastating portrait of the day's toll. There was Brian Sweeney, who left that final, loving voicemail for his wife from Flight 175. There was Chuck Costello, a civilian who ran back into the World Trade Center to help free people who were trapped and never came out. Every name on the long list of victims represented a unique life cut short, a future stolen, and a network of family and friends left to navigate a world without them. The grief was personal, but it was also national and global. The impact extended far beyond those who lost their lives. Thousands were injured, and in the years since, many more have suffered from illnesses related to the toxic dust and debris at Ground Zero. The psychological trauma for survivors, first responders, and the entire nation has been deep and long-lasting. The attacks of 9/11 did not just destroy buildings and take lives, they inflicted a wound on the collective psyche of a generation. The day left behind a legacy of loss and sorrow, a reminder of the fragility of life and the immense human cost of hatred and violence. As the dust began to settle, a pressing question emerged. Who was responsible for this act of war? The answer pointed to a global terrorist network known as Al-Qaeda, led by a wealthy Saudi exile named Osama bin Laden. The attacks were the result of years of meticulous planning, conceived by a man named Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and executed by the 19 hijackers. This was not a random act of violence. It was a carefully orchestrated plot designed to strike at the economic, military, and political heart of the United States. The goal was to inflict mass casualties and sow fear and chaos across the Western world. The 19 hijackers were mostly from Saudi Arabia, with others from the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and Lebanon. They were divided into 4 teams, with each team including at least one individual who had received pilot training in the United States. These men had spent months, and in some cases years, living in American communities, blending in while they prepared for their mission. They learned to fly commercial jets, studied flight patterns, and rehearsed their plan. The sophistication and patience of the plot were chilling, revealing a new and formidable kind of enemy. Al-Qaeda's motives were rooted in a twisted, extremist ideology that opposed American influence in the Middle East, U.S. support for Israel, and the presence of American troops in Saudi Arabia, the home of Islam's holiest sites. Bin Laden had declared war on the United States in the late 1990s, and his organization had already carried out attacks on U.S. embassies in Africa and the USS Cole in Yemen. But 9/11 was an attack on a scale that no one had anticipated. It was intended to be a spectacular blow that would rally support for Al-Qaeda's cause and demonstrate America's vulnerability. In the weeks and months following the attacks, the United States and its allies launched a global war on terror. The immediate focus was Afghanistan, where the ruling Taliban regime was sheltering Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. Within a month, U.S. forces invaded the country to dismantle the terrorist network and remove the Taliban from power. This marked the beginning of a long and complex conflict that would define American foreign policy for the next 2 decades. The hunt for the architects of 9/11 had begun, a quest for justice that would stretch across the globe and last for years. The September 11th attacks did more than just change the New York skyline. They reshaped the world. In the United States, a new era of security began. The Department of Homeland Security was created, and the Transportation Security Administration, or TSA, was established, fundamentally changing the experience of air travel. Cockpit doors were reinforced, and security measures at airports became far more stringent. The sense of vulnerability led to the passage of new laws, like the Patriot Act, granting the government expanded surveillance powers in the name of national security, sparking a long and ongoing debate about the balance between safety and civil liberties. The attacks also propelled the United States into 2 long and costly wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. The War on Terror became the defining feature of American foreign policy, leading to global counterterrorism operations and complex geopolitical shifts. While many al-Qaeda leaders, including Osama bin Laden, were eventually brought to justice, the extremist ideology they championed has persisted and even spread. Today, as we mark the 24th anniversary of that day in 2025, the threat of terrorism has evolved, with new groups and new tactics emerging in a world that is more connected, and in some ways more divided, than ever. At the sites of the attacks, memorials now stand as solemn tributes to the lives that were lost. At Ground Zero, 2 reflecting pools sit in the footprints of the Twin Towers, their waterfalls a constant quiet roar. The names of every victim are etched in bronze around them. One World Trade Center, the Freedom Tower, rises 1,776 feet into the sky, a symbol of resilience. At the Pentagon and in the field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, memorials also provide places for reflection and remembrance, ensuring that the sacrifices of that day are never forgotten. They remind us of the worst of humanity, but also the very best. Today, the legacy of 9/11 is all around us. It's in the way we travel, in the news we watch, and in the political landscape we navigate. For those who remember it, the day remains a vivid personal memory. For a new generation born after 2001, it is a piece of history. But the lessons of 9/11, about resilience, about heroism, about the importance of unity in the face of hatred, are timeless. The world changed forever on that clear September morning, and the responsibility to remember, to learn, and to honor the memory of the thousands who died is one that we will carry for all the years to come.